The November wind whipped across the driveway, rustling the dry leaves that clung stubbornly to the oak trees. I paused at the edge of my truck, my hand steady despite the pounding of my heart. Taped under the dashboard was an envelope, the kind of weight that made your stomach tighten, a weight I instantly recognized. Cash. Maybe something else. I knew who had put it there. My son Michael. For years I had believed I knew him. The boy I watched grow from a small curious child into a strong capable man. The same man who now, in his late 30s, was married with a young daughter, Emma, my little granddaughter who had the brightest laugh I'd ever heard. I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I just moved. Carefully, I took the envelope and walked across the gravel to Michael's car, placing it in the glove compartment. A simple action, yet my mind raced with every possible outcome. Back inside, I poured myself a cup of coffee and waited. My heart skipped when I heard sirens in the distance, but not yet. 23 minutes later, everything would change. Flashback. My name is Margaret, and I'm 61 years old. I spent 35 years working as a nurse in a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio before retiring. I raised 2 children with my late husband, David, who passed away 5 years ago. We had a modest home, a small garden, and dreams we worked tirelessly to support. Michael, my youngest, is 38. Married to Sarah with Emma, 7 years old. He seemed like a man I knew. But 3 months ago I started noticing changes. Requests to borrow my car for errands that felt off. Jittery behavior. Avoidance of eye contact. Constant checking of his phone. The first time I suspected something was wrong, I found a small plastic bag wedged between the seat and console, empty but reeking of chemicals I recognized instantly. Panic hit my chest, but I told myself it could be a mistake. 6 weeks later, he borrowed my car again. I watched from the living room window as he lingered in the driver's seat for 5 minutes, talking rapidly on the phone, sweat glistening on his brow despite the October chill. That's when I knew. My son was involved in something dangerous. After he left, I searched the car thoroughly. Hidden under the carpet by the pedals was a burner phone. Prepaid, filled with coded messages, addresses, times. My stomach sank. Michael was using my vehicle to move drugs. I didn't confront him yet. I had to understand everything first. That night I barely slept, Catherine's voice echoing in my mind. Trust is earned twice. He hadn't been honest, but I would give him a chance. A chance to fix it before it was too late. I thought I could protect him and understand him, but the messages on that phone revealed a world I wasn't ready for. The next day I made a call that would change everything. The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual. Emma's laughter didn't echo through the halls. She was at school, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional bird tapping on the window. I couldn't let my mind wander to fear. I needed clarity. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. A private investigator, my late husband, and I had once consulted about a business dispute. His name was Alan, reliable, discreet. Margaret, it's been a long time, he said, voice calm. I need your help. It's my son, I confessed, feeling the lump in my throat. I think he's in trouble. Dangerous trouble. I described what I'd found. The burner phone, the envelope under the dashboard, the unusual car trips. Alan didn't interrupt. He just listened, the kind of patience that made you feel safe even when your world was cracking apart. Send me photos of everything you found, he said finally. We'll track the activity and figure out exactly what he's involved in. That afternoon I waited by the window, coffee cooling in my hand, my eyes glued to the driveway. Michael pulled into the garage around 4 p.m., humming softly, oblivious, or maybe just pretending. I greeted him calmly. Hey Mom, he said, smiling. But it didn't reach his eyes. Hi Michael, I replied evenly. Can we talk? He froze for a second, but then nodded, following me to the kitchen. I kept my tone soft, motherly, careful. I couldn't scare him, but I couldn't let him lie either. Mom, what's wrong? He asked. I just want to understand, I said. Can you tell me why you've been using my car? And my trust for things you shouldn't be? He looked down, jaw tight. Mom, it's not what you think. I held his gaze. Michael, I found the burner phone, the envelope. I know. The room went silent except for the ticking of the clock. His hand shook slightly as he pushed his wedding ring up and down. I could feel the weight of every secret he tried to hide. I I didn't want you to find out like this, he said finally, voice trembling. I didn't know who else I could trust. I was in over my head. I breathed slowly, keeping calm. Panic would only make him shut down. We're going to fix this. But first you need to be honest with me. Everything. And for the first time Michael started telling the truth. About the people he owed, the threats, the small deliveries he thought were harmless. It was worse than I imagined, but it explained the erratic behavior, the fear in his eyes. By the end of the conversation I realized something terrifying. I couldn't protect him by myself. But I had to try. I thought we could fix it between us, but when the first shipment went missing I knew we were already in too deep. And that's when the calls started, threats I never expected from my own son's so-called friends. That night sleep was impossible. Every sound in the house made me jump, the creak of the floorboards, the wind rattling the window, even the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Michael had gone to bed, but I couldn't. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, Alan's messages on screen, trying to piece together every movement my son had made. It was worse than I'd feared. The contacts, the addresses, the timestamps, they formed a pattern that led to a network far bigger than Michael had admitted. Small runs had turned into bigger deals. And the people he owed weren't forgiving types. I knew I had to act carefully. One wrong move and I could lose him, or worse, myself or Emma. The next morning I watched Michael leave with my car. Just as I had the first time I suspected trouble. Only this time I followed at a discreet distance, keeping to side streets, staying out of sight. Every stop he made, every face he exchanged a package with, I recorded on my phone. License plates, bag sizes, even the way he glanced around nervously. By noon, I had enough evidence to know exactly what he was doing and who he was meeting. But I also realized something critical. I couldn't just confront him again. He was too deep, too afraid. If I went to the police without a plan, he'd disappear. Or worse, they'd target us. So I made a choice. I moved the envelope I had found under the dashboard, the one that contained the cash and possibly drugs, from my car to his glove compartment. Every move was deliberate, every step calculated. If the police stopped him now, the evidence would be there, ready. When he returned home that afternoon, he smiled as if nothing had happened. "Thanks, Mom," he said casually, handing me the keys. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. That night Alan called. "Margaret, you've done the right thing. This will force them to act before it's too late." I nodded, though no one could see me. Force them to act, yes. But I also realized something else. I was preparing to betray my own son for his survival. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I poured myself a cup of tea and stared at the envelope, now sitting in Michael's glove box. It represented everything. The danger, the lies, the betrayal, but also a chance to save him. The next day the first message came. A text that made my blood run cold. Someone knew what I had done. And if they found out before Michael, there would be no turning back. The next morning I woke before dawn. Coffee in hand, I checked Michael's car one last time. The envelope was there. Exactly where I had placed it. I felt a knot in my stomach, knowing what I was about to do. This wasn't just about catching him. It was about saving him from himself, from the people he'd entangled, from a life that could end in prison or worse. I drove to the local police station, my hands trembling slightly on the wheel. I asked to speak with an officer about suspected drug trafficking. Officer Ramirez, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice, listened patiently as I laid out everything. The burner phone, the photos I'd taken, the locations Michael had visited, the envelope, the packages exchanged. "Mrs. Collins," she said finally, "this takes courage. We can help, but we need you to understand. It will lead to your son's arrest." I nodded. I had known that all along. My son had to face the consequences, but more than that, he needed a chance to survive this mess. We made a plan. The police would follow Michael on his first run that morning, intercept him discreetly, and make the arrest. If he cooperated, they could offer reduced charges in exchange for information about the larger network. I stayed home, every tick of the clock a hammer in my chest. Then 23 minutes after I got back, the phone rang. My heart leapt. It was Vanessa. "Margaret, they arrested Michael. They say he had drugs in the car." "This has to be a mistake," she cried. "Vanessa, take Emma and stay with your parents. Don't go home. Don't talk to anyone except me or our lawyer. Do you understand?" I said firmly. There was silence. Then a trembling voice. You knew you did this on purpose? Yes, I admitted. I couldn't let him go any further. It was the only way to protect him and Emma. The next 3 days were unbearable. Michael was denied bail. He couldn't understand why I had moved the envelope, why I had involved the police. When I finally visited him, he was a shadow of the young man I'd raised. The vibrant, carefree boy now caged in an orange jumpsuit. You set me up. He spat through the glass, his voice flat. I found it in my car. I moved it to yours. And yes, I called the police. Why? Because I love you. Because I'm your mother, and I couldn't watch you destroy yourself. I said, my voice steady but quiet. He didn't respond. He slammed the phone down. I sat there long after they took him back, the weight of the decision settling over me like a stone. I had betrayed my son, but I had saved his life. I didn't know if he'd ever forgive me. But one thing was certain, he was alive, and for the first time there was a chance he could come back from the darkness. The days after Michael's arrest were a whirlwind of calls, paperwork, and heartbreak. Vanessa moved with Emma to her parents' house in Burlington. The restraining order made it clear. Michael needed to stay away until the legal process played out. I spent the night staring at the photos I'd taken. The exchanges, the locations, the license plates. Every image reminded me of what could have happened if I hadn't acted. My heart ached for my son, but I couldn't ignore the truth. He had made choices that endangered himself, his daughter, and everyone around him. Michael's lawyer quickly advised cooperation. The Crown offered a deal. Full cooperation, complete disclosure of the network, and a chance for a reduced sentence. It was still prison, years away from his daughter, but it was better than the alternative. Life ruined, possibly lost forever. He started giving names, addresses, and supply chains to the police. Within weeks, 17 arrests were made. People who had haunted the streets for years were finally caught, thanks to Michael's information. It was the first step toward reclaiming his life, but the personal cost was enormous. I visited him in the detention center for the first time after the arrests. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired beyond his years. We didn't speak much at first. Silence filled the room. A shared understanding that some things couldn't be fixed overnight. Mom, I get it now, he said quietly after a long pause. I see why you did what you did. I reached across the table, placing my hand near his. I did it because I love you. Because you're my son, and I couldn't watch you destroy yourself or our family. You'll have a chance to come back, but you have to want it too. Slowly, our conversations became more frequent, short but meaningful. He asked about Emma. I showed him photos, updates on school, piano lessons, small victories. He listened quietly, and sometimes he even smiled when he saw her drawings or crafts. The hardest part was Vanessa. She was rebuilding her life, trying to shield Emma from the chaos. And yet we all had to navigate the fractured family together. It was tense, awkward, and painful but necessary. I learned that protecting those you love sometimes meant standing in the storm, even when it made everyone angry. Michael started participating in programs in the detention center, therapy, GED classes, volunteer work in the library, mentoring other inmates. He wanted to change, and slowly he began to understand the consequences of his choices, and the love that had forced me to act. Michael's journey to redemption had begun, but the road was long. The next chapter isn't just about serving time. It's about rebuilding trust, mending family bonds, and proving that even after the darkest mistakes, there's a chance to come back. Months passed, and the rhythm of our new reality slowly settled in. Emma came to see me every weekend. Vanessa dropped her off Saturday mornings, and I returned her Sunday evenings. Our routines, baking cookies, watching movies, working on jigsaw puzzles, became small acts of normalcy, reminders that life could still be sweet even after chaos. I told Emma simple truths. Your daddy made some mistakes, I said gently one afternoon while we stirred chocolate chip cookie dough. He's learning to make better choices, and he loves you very much. She nodded solemnly, flower on her nose, trusting the explanation her 8-year-old mind could understand. Michael's calls came weekly at first, short and cautious. He asked about school projects, piano recitals, even the little garden Emma and I started in the backyard. Slowly, the conversations grew longer. He shared about the programs he was taking in the detention center, about helping other inmates with GED studies, about learning skills he'd never thought he'd need. It wasn't easy. Trust had been broken. Some nights I lay awake thinking, did I do the right thing? Could there have been another way? The answer always came back the same. Michael was alive, Emma was safe, and our family had a chance to heal. That was worth the pain. Vanessa was cautious, understandably. She rebuilt her life while guarding Emma. But she eventually allowed small interactions between Michael and their daughter under supervision. The first time he saw Emma through a glass partition, he froze, unable to believe how much she had grown. I reminded him gently, patience. She needs to see your love safely before anything else. Through the winter, I watched my son begin to rebuild himself. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for his daughter and for the chance to reclaim his life. I could see glimpses of the boy he once was, kind, thoughtful, full of life. The same boy I'd walked to school, the same boy who had laughed at silly jokes in our kitchen, the same boy who had once held Emma on his shoulders, making her squeal with delight. That boy was still there, buried under mistakes, but still there. I also learned that sometimes protection isn't just about stopping immediate danger. It's about guiding someone through the long path of consequences, giving them a framework to grow, and letting them see the impact of their choices. Michael's journey wasn't over, and neither was mine. We were learning to navigate a world where love sometimes looked like tough decisions, patience, and accountability. Michael was slowly finding his way, Emma was safe, and I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Love isn't always comfort and happiness. It's courage, boundaries, and the willingness to face impossible choices. Spring came slowly to our little corner of Oakville, and with it, small but meaningful changes. Emma had grown more confident, her laughter filling the house again. Every weekend, she brought life back into the spaces that had felt quiet and heavy. She asked questions about her father, about why he wasn't home, and I answered with honesty framed for a child. Daddy made mistakes, sweetheart. But he loves you very much, and he's learning to be better. Michael's calls had grown more frequent, more thoughtful. He described the programs he was taking, the work he did helping others in the detention center, and the books he was reading. I listened carefully, savoring every word. I could hear the boy I had raised, the man I still believed he could become, shining through the mistakes and the fear. One Saturday, while baking cookies, Emma looked up at me with serious eyes and flour on her nose. "Grandma says family means taking care of each other no matter what," she said, echoing something she had learned at school. My heart tightened. "That's true, Emma," I replied gently. "Sometimes taking care of each other means making really hard choices, even when it's painful, even when people get angry at us." Michael had to learn the same lesson, though in a harsher way. He had faced consequences for his choices, but through the guidance of law enforcement and therapy programs in prison, he was finding ways to atone and grow. Every story he shared with me about helping other inmates or teaching GED classes reminded me that change was possible, even in the darkest places. I also learned to forgive in new ways. Forgiving Michael didn't mean forgetting the pain or the risk he had caused. It meant seeing his potential and supporting him as he worked toward redemption. It meant holding Emma safely while loving her father from a distance. It meant trusting that the hardest choices, moving that envelope, calling the police, had been necessary to save them both. One afternoon, while Emma and I worked on a puzzle, her small hands placing pieces with concentration, I thought about Catherine. How she would have handled this mess. How she would have guided us with strength and calm. I felt her presence, the echo of her wisdom reminding me. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who won't let you fail, even when it hurts. Michael's transformation was slow, not without setbacks, but it was real. Every phone call, every letter, every story about helping others in the detention center showed me that even the deepest mistakes could be a foundation for something better. Emma learned to see her father through a lens of hope, even as she adjusted to the reality of his absence. Even behind bars, Michael was becoming a man I could respect again. Emma's laughter, his progress, and the lessons of love and boundaries we had all learned were slowly weaving our family back together. The day of Michael's sentencing arrived like a storm I couldn't prepare for. Oakville's courthouse loomed tall and gray, its stone walls echoing with years of stories, triumphs, tragedies, confessions, and consequences. I held Emma's hand tightly in the lobby, feeling her small fingers tremble. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could sense the weight of it all. Inside the courtroom, Michael sat in an orange jumpsuit, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. He looked older, wearier than I remembered. Yet when his gaze briefly met mine, I saw something flicker, a hint of the son I had always known, still present beneath the mistakes. The Crown Attorney presented the evidence. The envelope I had found, the burner phone, the photos of the transactions, and the patterns of activity Michael had engaged in. Every piece of proof was damning yet necessary. My heart ached, but I reminded myself why I had made the choice I did. I had acted to protect him, to protect Emma, to protect what remained of our family. Detective Singh approached me after the courtroom proceedings and whispered gently, "Mr. Peterson, what you did saved him. Without your intervention, he wouldn't have had a chance at parole, or life." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It hadn't felt like saving. It had felt like pushing my own son off a cliff and hoping a net appeared. But now I saw it. The net was there, waiting. The judge's voice filled the room, heavy with gravity. Michael's sentence was reduced due to his cooperation and the information he provided, thanks to the evidence and testimony we had given. 8 years with eligibility for parole in 3 was his new reality. As the words sank in, I felt a mixture of relief, sorrow, and hope. After the courtroom emptied, I found myself standing outside, the cold air biting my cheeks. Emma tugged on my sleeve, and I looked down at her flour-smeared face. And for the first time that day, I smiled. Life was complicated, painful, and full of hard choices, but it was still life. Over the next months, our family slowly rebuilt. Michael started to embrace his rehabilitation programs, learning skills, contributing to the library, helping fellow inmates. He called regularly, sometimes emotional, sometimes reflective, always with the understanding that he had to earn trust back. Not just with me but with himself. Emma's laughter returned fully, echoing through our home. We baked cookies, worked on puzzles, and told stories that didn't involve fear or risk. I watched her grow, her curiosity and compassion flourishing, and felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the choices I had made, though agonizing, had given her a future with both parents, even if one was temporarily absent. The hardest choices often carry the heaviest consequences. Yet they can also save lives. Life after the courtroom wasn't easy, but it was real. Every Saturday morning, Emma would arrive at my house, backpack in hand, eyes bright with curiosity and energy. We'd bake chocolate chip cookies, play board games, and talk about school. Sometimes she asked about her dad, Michael, and I answered honestly in a way she could understand. "Grandma," she said one afternoon, flour on her nose, "why does Daddy have to stay at the place with the orange clothes?" I smiled softly, kneeling to her level. "Because he made some mistakes, sweetheart. But mistakes don't mean he's not your dad. They mean he needs help to make things right. And that's exactly what he's doing." Her eyes widened, a mix of concern and understanding. "Is he okay? He's getting better every day. And we're all here to help him." I realized then what Catherine had always taught me. Love sometimes isn't about keeping people happy. It's about keeping them alive, giving them the chance to find their way back. Michael's journey through prison, his rehabilitation, and his eventual parole were all pieces of a path I couldn't walk for him, but I could guide him toward. Michael began calling more often, sharing small victories, helping other inmates with GED classes, assisting in the library, taking counseling sessions seriously. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. He didn't forgive himself easily, but he started to see that the steps he took now could rewrite his future. For Emma, life went on with stability and love. She thrived in school, pursued hobbies, and carried lessons of resilience I hoped she would never forget. And every time I watched her, I was reminded of the balance between protection and freedom, between intervention and guidance. I often thought about that envelope I had found under my dashboard, the choice I made to move it, and the chain of events it set in motion. People might judge me for it, call it betrayal, or say there was another way. But I knew the truth. My actions saved my son's life, and gave my granddaughter the chance to grow up with her father, even if it took time. The ultimate lesson crystallized in my mind. Love isn't just about comfort or happiness. It's about hard decisions, about setting boundaries, about acting even when the path is painful. Consequences are temporary. Death and destruction are permanent. Sometimes the right choice feels wrong in the moment, but it preserves life, hope, and the chance to heal. Years from now, when Michael walks out of that facility, I will be there. And I know he will come home not just to me, but to the lessons we've learned, the meaning of accountability, the strength of family, and the enduring power of love that doesn't flinch in the face of hardship. Family isn't perfect. Love isn't easy. But sometimes the hardest choices, the ones that break our hearts, are the ones that save lives. And that is the story I will carry forever. Sometimes love isn't about keeping someone happy. Sometimes love is about making the hard, heartbreaking choices that no one else understands. My son is still alive, my granddaughter is safe, and our family has a chance to heal. But it started with one impossible decision. If you've ever had to choose between comfort and courage, you know exactly how I felt. Remember, protecting those you love sometimes means breaking your own heart to save theirs.